Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating text titled Hikmah and Mercy. We're going to take a deep, calm, and methodical journey through this document, unpacking its profound insights section by section. We'll be exploring exactly how these two powerful concepts, wisdom and mercy, intertwine in the Islamic tradition. So let's get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the preface, move on to the primacy of mercy, then uniting wisdom and mercy, practical hermeneutics, concrete examples, and finally, a final summary.
Section 1. The Preface, Establishing the Author's Posture.
Let's start with a direct quote from the text. The author writes, "If my beliefs and behaviors are consistent with what the Qur'an itself describes as a Muslim, then I am that. But if my not joining a sect cancels my membership, then do not consider me that. Allah is my judge." So to put this in simple English, the author is immediately stripping away all tribalism. They're telling us that their religious identity isn't based on an exclusive club or a specific group title, but purely on whether their everyday actions actually align with Scripture. They are placing ultimate judgment solely with the divine, effectively removing human politics from the entire equation.
To summarize this opening section, the author adopts a posture of profound humility. The focus here is firmly on sincere behavior over earthly labels. By avoiding sectarian titles, the author clears the slate right from the start, preparing us to look at the concepts of wisdom and mercy objectively, without any organizational bias.
Section 2. The Primacy of Mercy, the Governing Lens.
The text lays out its central thesis very clearly here. It says, mercy, or rahama, is not merely one attribute among many in the Quran. It is the lens through which the whole message is meant to be read and lived. In simple terms, mercy isn't just an optional warm feeling or a side note. It is the foundational logic of the faith. The source material notes this is framed by the opening formula of most chapters, the Basmalah, which translates roughly to, "In the name of God, the most merciful, the especially merciful." This means every single law, warning, or story has to be read through the context of that immense mercy.
Let's pause for a second to really clarify this key Arabic term, rahma, which translates to mercy. Rahma is defined here as an encompassing divine attribute aimed at saving, healing, reforming, and drawing people toward good rather than seeking gratuitous punishment. The crucial takeaway is that Rahma is not passive. It's a highly active, organizing force that serves as the ultimate motive for divine revelation.
So, to summarize this second section, the text argues that mercy governs all law and discipline. Even when the text features strict warnings, they are situated within a merciful horizon designed to restore balance and correct behavior. It's not just about how many times the word mercy appears. It's not a frequency statistic. It is the structural purpose of the text itself.
Section 3. Uniting Wisdom and Mercy, the Balanced Path. Before we go any further, we have to define our second key Arabic term, hikmah, which translates to wisdom. Hikmah is the right application of knowledge, discerning ends, means, priorities, and the underlying spirit behind the rules. If a rahmah is the humane goal we just talked about, hikmah is the practical intelligence needed to actually get there effectively. Now let's look at how the text compares two different approaches to this wisdom. The text says the orthodox perspective prioritizes rulings that serve the objectives of the law, such as preserving life, intellect, and faith. It contrasts this with what it calls the Sufi perspective, which prioritizes an inner state that perceives hidden wounds and balances intervention with compassion. I really want to pause and explain clearly that the term Sufi is being used here by the author in a very generic way. It basically means a more esoteric or inner spiritual point of view. It may not reflect the specific formalized views of tariqah or formal Sufi groups. Simply put, one view looks at the outward legal objectives and the other looks at the inward spiritual health.
Wrapping up this third section, the core takeaway is that a mature approach has to unite these two concepts. Mercy supplies the humane end, while wisdom supplies the practical discernment. Why does this matter? Well, because together, they prevent religion from becoming a cold, unfeeling calculation on one hand and prevent it from becoming pure, ineffective sentimentality on the other. You need both.
Section 4. Practical hermeneutics, reshaping interpretation.
A critical tool introduced in this interpretive method is the Arabic concept of rath al-haraj, which translates to removing hardship. It is a legal maxim prioritizing the easing of difficulties and the resolution of ambiguities toward preserving human dignity. In plain English, when a religious text is ambiguous or when multiple options exist, this principle dictates that your priority is always to remove unnecessary suffering. You choose the path that causes the lesser harm.
The author outlines concrete steps for applying this lens. You begin with the basmala posture, meaning you assume the text aims for human flourishing. Next, you read verses in their immediate context. Then, you actively ask what harm is being prevented. And ultimately, you prioritize human dignity and spiritual health. To summarize this section, this method transforms the act of interpretation. It goes from just searching for rules to a disciplined pursuit of communal healing.
Section 5. Concrete examples, testing the theory.
So the text poses a tough question. How exactly does mercy-informed wisdom approach texts regarding marital discipline? Looking neutrally at the source material, the author addresses texts that, when read in strict isolation, might be used to justify harsh treatment, and asks how reading with mercy fundamentally reshapes this accountability.
Here is how the text answers that. It states, communities must exhaust non-coercive remedies, prioritize safety, and treat reconciliation as the goal, rather than punishment as the end. Explaining this simply, the author argues that true hikmah, or wisdom, requires that any strict measure absolutely must be a proportional, final last resort. The interpreter has to prioritize the safety and dignity of the more vulnerable party, interpreting any ambiguous language strictly to prevent harm and abuse. Moving on to a communal example, the text asks, what does the historical example of Ali ibn Abi Talib demonstrate? The text examines a historical story where a person commits a wrong out of deep desperation or need, and Ali chooses measured compassion over immediate, harsh retribution. The text explains the lesson here wonderfully. Restraint is not weakness, but strategic compassion. Investigating root causes prevents cycles of retaliation and repairs social bonds. In simple terms, by addressing the root causes of wrongdoing, like providing for someone's basic human needs rather than just instantly punishing their theft, this approach utilizes restraint to heal and safely reintegrate the person back into society. Summarizing these concrete examples, we start to see a very clear pattern emerge. The law is tested by humane ends. Public policy has to protect the most vulnerable. Correction aims for rehabilitation, and firmness is only used to prevent a greater injustice. Prioritizing mercy doesn't mean abandoning rigor at all. It just means ensuring that justice is always tempered by a restorative, healing goal. Section 6. Final Summary. The Ultimate Criterion. To give a calm, definitive summary of the overarching message of this entire report, mercy is the organizing purpose of revelation. Punitive texts are merely instruments designed to prevent greater evil. They are not ends in themselves. Therefore, interpretation must always seek to expand compassion. Ultimately, in every single legal, ethical, or political decision, the default must be to preserve human dignity and spiritual health. I'll leave you with this exact, powerful quote from the text. Wisdom that discerns and mercy that heals. True interpretation of Scripture according to this text is not about seeking domination or vindictiveness. It is about mastering an active intelligence driven by a profound underlying mercy. So, I leave you with this to think about. How might applying this exact framework of merciful wisdom completely change the way we approach conflicts, texts, and relationships in our own lives? Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer.